Hello, in this video tutorial we're going to talk about installing GNU Octave. GNU Octave is an alternative to MATLAB, and it's very powerful. To me, in my uses and in the uses that you'll probably have, this will be plenty sufficient. You probably won't notice any differences between MATLAB and GNU Octave, other than there's a little bit of an overhead in getting started, but we'll walk through that here. And we'll break this up into two parts, what I've called the install process and then the post-install process. So what does GNU Octave do? This is similar to what MATLAB does, and it does it in a similar way as well. Well, symbolic analysis, so derivatives, integrals, algebraic manipulation, etc., anything involving symbolic manipulation, that's as opposed to numeric computations where sometimes we give variables values, but those really aren't symbols anymore. They're really just numbers. They're just letters being put in place of the symbol, the number, which I guess you could call a symbol, but what we mean by symbolic analysis is actually manipulating variables. This has some powerful plotting features, and it's very customizable, more powerful than anything we could do in graphing calculators and that sort of thing. Now, if you have MATLAB already, you probably don't need to install Octave. The only case in which you would need to do this is the symbolic package within MATLAB is not standard. If you have a student package, that symbolic package usually is built into the student package. But if you're running a general license on MATLAB, then you probably don't have this feature anyway, in which case it would be good to have Octave running on your computer. So what are the challenges? Well, one of the biggest challenges is just really getting the symbolic package to actually operate within Octave. And here's the reason. There's a hierarchy. Octave is what we're running our code from, and Octave relies on software called Python, which you may or may not have heard of before, a powerful mathematical programming language. And Python relies on SymPy, which stands for Symbolic Python. And that's sort of, I guess, a library, if you will, for Python. So Octave communicates with Python, which works with SymPy, and then what happens is the computations occur within SymPy, and they get imported into Octave. So Octave basically exports some instructions. Python and SymPy do stuff in the background, which you'll never see, and then they return the result to Octave. So this is only a once-around deal. So all of this stuff only needs to happen once, and so as a result, we'll walk through that. There's really, I don't think, a necessary order of operations here, but we're going to go ahead and run it in this order. So we'll install GNU Octave last, and then we'll have to do a post-install process to make sure that Python, SymPy, and GNU are all communicating and they recognize each other. So we'll go to this link, python.org/downloads, and we'll be given the option to download one of two different versions of Python, and we're going to go with 2.7.9. We do want to go with the older version because of some compatibility issues, and there really is no need to get 3.4.3. So wait in your preferred browser for the download to complete. You can see this is I've done this a few times. I've gone through and uninstalled everything, and now I'm going to walk through installing it from scratch. So once that loads, and you're welcome to read some of the release notes and things like that, which may or may not be much help. But once this loads, we will go ahead and get started with the installation. The installation is fairly standard. There's not really anything that we need to change, but we'll kind of walk through some of those details. So once your install is complete and you've clicked on the icon, you're going to be asked if you want to run this. This is, of course, on a PC. I'm running a PC here. A Mac should be very similar. We should go ahead and run this now. And we'll just go ahead, you can make any specifications you want here. I'm going to install this for all users since I'm the only user on this computer. And I'm going to direct Python to install it wherever it sees fit. So it's going to go to my C drive as opposed to program files, and that's perfectly fine. Let's go ahead and leave it in the local drive. So whatever yours is called, mine is called C, but it should default to a location. So we'll let it do its install. Yeah, I've already installed it once, so I'm going to let it go ahead and overwrite things. So I'm going to let this run through its process, and times may vary, but be patient with it. Let it do its thing, and once it's done, then we can proceed to the next step. Okay, now in this step, when it takes us to the customized Python 2.7.9, when we scroll all the way down, right here you can see that there's an X where it says add python.executable to path. What we want to do is we want to check that, and we want to say entire feature will be installed on local hard drive. So hopefully that will set our path for us so that Octave knows where to find Python. And now we're going to click Next, and we're going to let it do its install. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here in between because this is not very exciting. And if you need to, you might be asked permission for Python to install. So if that window pops up, click Yes. And now it's going to go through its install process. It may take a little bit of time, but keep in mind you only have to install this once, so be patient with it. Don't cancel or try to reinstall because that could create a mess. So just let it do its thing, and just be patient with it. Okay, so after a couple of minutes or so, you now have the complete Python 2.7.9 installer window, and just go ahead and click Finish. If it does install a desktop shortcut, you can delete the desktop shortcut if you'd like. Otherwise, if you know you're going to use Python in the future, you can actually directly work within Python. But we're not going to directly work within Python, so I go ahead and delete the shortcut off my desktop, knowing that I can access it later because my desktop is already convoluted enough with items. So the next step in our process will be to install SymPy. So we're going to install version 0.7.6. And so we'll click on that link, and that will take us to the SymPy website. This will look somewhat intimidating at first. You'll have tar.gz, these source installer files, but just from 0.7.6 we're going to scroll down and go to the downloads portion right below it, and we're just going to go ahead and install, in our case, this is going to be the win32.exe installer for Windows. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that and let it download, and once that's downloaded I can proceed to execute that file and go ahead and install SymPy. So now that's appeared as being runnable, so I'll go ahead and run that. Again, I'll let Windows know that it's okay to execute that file, and once my installer pops up I'll just direct it to install wherever it would like. So we get this window. Up at the top you can't see, but it says SymPy-0.7.6. We'll go ahead and click Next. We will not try to redirect it anywhere else. It's going to try to find Python. So it said Python version 2.7 found in registry. So we should actually have Python installed first before we install into the library of Python. So now we'll click Next. It's going to tell us maybe that it can't create some different things. That's okay. Don't worry too much about that. We're going to go ahead and let it do its installation process. And again, let it sort of do whatever it needs to do. And once that's done, we can proceed to install Octave. Again, this might take a little bit of time, so go ahead and grab a cup of coffee or tea or soda or water and let it do its installation. At some point it may appear that the installer freezes because there are potentially some dense files it has to create or load, but just be patient. So my installer is now complete. Nothing exciting happens. It just says click the Finish button to exit the setup wizard, so we'll click Finish. And now we're ready to go ahead and proceed to install GNU Octave. So we'll do that by actually going to this website, and GNU Octave actually has a page. You're welcome to Google GNU Octave. Ultimately it's going to take us to this page. It's just sort of like a mirror site, and this site will actually allow you to download the correct version. So we'll go ahead and click on that. That will take us to this site, and this is the unofficial GNU Octave builds for Windows, but this is the trusted one, and so we'll go ahead and 3.8.2-5, we'll go ahead down to the installer. Now we want to do the installer. If you download any of these other ones, you're going to be downloading source files, which is doesn't actually give you the prompts, and is a little bit more complicated to install. So we're going to go ahead and download the installer, and that's about 118 megs. So this may take a couple of minutes depending on the speed of your connection, your internet connection. Once that's done, we can again go ahead and click on this and execute it. Now, because I've already previously downloaded this, I'm I'm going to go ahead and cancel this one, but you would want to wait until that downloads. I already have it downloaded here. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on Octave 3.6.4 and let that, oh, I'm sorry, wrong one, 3.8.2-5 installer. And so now we're going to give Windows permission to access and run this. So this now kind of looks prettier. It shows us a little bit of an example, and if you've run MATLAB, that looks pretty familiar. So take your time with this. Run next. License agreement, of course. Yeah, we read that. Okay. So now we want to tell it what to do. So in this case, I'm going to install for all users, create desktop shortcuts. I will have it do that because I want to have that local and I want to be able to access it. Now we're going to go ahead and leave the BLAS library implementation alone. So we'll have all three checked and we'll let the default settings go. And again, it's going to ask us where to install, but go ahead and install it wherever it dictates it's going to install itself, which is typically on your local drive. This you definitely have to be patient with. This does take a little bit of time because it's installing a lot of libraries and things like that that will be accessed. So it's going to do some file extraction, then it's going to come back and actually install the file. So I'm going to go ahead and pause, and once I get to another prompt, I will go ahead and unpause. So once everything is installed properly, you'll get the completing GNU Octave setup wizard, and we're going to go ahead and check both of these options, leave these checked. The README file will actually appear in your web browser, so we'll click Finish. And so in your web browser, it's going to jump to the README. There's some information there, some pretty standard stuff. Oh, and there's Octave loading up. And so this is just going to give you a welcome message and tell you about some things. And it also importantly tells you that to install packages, we actually have to run a buildpackages.m file, which will install all the standard Octave packages that may likely be used. And then this also tells us how to load packages. So we'll come back to that in the next video. But now we should, once this window pops up, you should now have Octave set up. And I have a little bit of stuff cut off here, but in the next video I'll readjust my window. But now you should be able to do something as simple as 3 plus 3 and press enter and get an answer. So this is our prompt window, and you'll notice some other things happening in here, including your command history, which I will just go ahead and click clear off a few things. And so we'll come back in the next video to actually run this. So congratulations, you now have Octave running. Now we're in the next step going to make sure that Octave and Python and SymPy are all linked together.